Seeing none, we'll move into finance with Ms. Hinton.
First, we have the LAMTD financials. Total revenues year-to-date through June 30 was $8.6 million, or 96% of the year-to-date budget. Fare box revenues reflect $208,000, or an unfavorable 44%. Ad valorem taxes totaled $5.67 million, or 101% of the total budgeted revenues. The Florida DOT operating grants is $1.52 million, which we bill quarterly. Year-to-date, we've received $962,000. FTA Section 537 operating and capital grants are budgeted at $2.93 million. Currently, we've received $870,000. On the expense side, the total expenses year-to-date through June 30 totaled $7.52 million, or 84% of the year-to-date budget. Salaries and benefits represent 65% of the budget. The expenses totaled $4.99 million, which is 16% under budget, or a favorable variance of $808,000. Professional and technical service expenses totaled $273,000, or 28% under the year-to-date budget. Fuel expenses totaled $529,000 year-to-date, which is over budget by 29%. Materials and supplies totaled $502,000, or 9% under budget. Based on the year-to-date budget to actual variances through June 30th, the financials reflect a favorable actual variance of $1.08 million, with 75% of the fiscal year completed. This is predominantly due to the influx of the ad valorem income tax and the favorable variance due to salaries and benefits expense.
Any questions on LAMTD? Okay.
Moving on to Polk County. The revenues totaled $6.1 million, or 91% of the year-to-date budget. The FTA drawdowns totaled $1.48 million, or 67% of the year-to-date budget. Rural FDOT grant revenues reflects $514,000, or 46% of the year-to-date budget. And the remaining FDOT block grant revenues totaled $612,000, or 130% of the year-to-date budget. The total expenses for the period totaled $5.59 million, or 83% of the year-to-date budget. Salaries and wages totaled $2.71 million, or 79% of the year-to-date budget. Operating expenses totaled $1.68 million, or 84% of the year-to-date budget. We finished with actual revenues exceeding expenses by $535,000.
Great.
Any questions? Okay. Next, we have TD. The revenues totaled $976,000, or 74% of the year-to-date budget. The TD Trust Fund grant drawdown reflected $887,000, or 75% of the grant. The county funding for the match totaled $89,000, or 68%. Total expenses for the period totaled $977,000, or 74% of the year-to-date budget. Salaries, wages, and benefits totaled $663,000, or 67% of the year-to-date budget. Operating expenses totaled $314,000, or 97% of the year-to-date budget. Unfortunately, actual expenses exceeded revenues by $1,153 due to the shortage of drivers. We've had to close routes, which has affected the ridership and the ability to draw down revenues. The TD drivers are also being utilized on other routes. Therefore, we use the job costing method and moved 5.98% of expenses related to TD drivers and reallocated those appropriately. Fuel costs were up by $1,100 and repairs were elevated by $2,300 for the month of June.
Thank you.
Next. For the board information and for compliance with the Florida statute section 218.415 requires the district to develop a policy and plan for the investment of surplus funds. The finance department is required to report to the LAMTD board at least annually on the investment policy and plan and on the investment results. As you can see on page 2, the investment income for the period ending September 30 has decreased since 2018, but is slowly starting to increase. As of fiscal year end 9/30/21, it was $14,000. Fiscal year 22-23, as of the end of May 31st, it's increased to 16,000. The investment yield also bottomed out in June of 2020 and is slowly starting to increase. The investment yield for June 2022 was 1.8%.
Going in the right direction.
Yes, thank goodness.
As far as the two approval items, is that the next item on the agenda?
We
We need to wait on that. The
Okay.
mayor is en route. He'll be here
Oh,
probably
excellent.
in about 12
I
minutes.
just saw that, but I don't think you need to approve the budget now. We do the first, second public hearing.
Oh,
I
okay,
just saw that.
okay, we can still wait to do the budget presentation until the mayor gets here. Doesn't have to be an approval item.
I was just talking about the
Yes.
contract modification.
Yes, ma'am.
E and F.
Yes,
And then, so can we go and maybe have Julia come up to do a TPO update?
fantastic.
Where's she at? She's right here. There you are. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, LAMTD board and now chair, members of the board and public and everybody else here. Julia Davis from the whole CPO. So we are in the middle still of the TDP major update. Right now, staff is working on the finance table. We concluded that exercise. The public involvement plan summary document, we are collecting items that can be used as appendices to the public involvement plan summary. So screenshots of pictures in buses, et cetera. And we are wrapping up the review of needs plan assessment. And you'll see more about this at the TPO meeting in a few weeks. The consultant made the maps of the needs plan, and the map is in this room. But behind
You can put Steve, I think it might be behind you.
this district. So this is the proposed 10-year needs plan. This is what the people said they need. This is not based on funding. So once the consultant receives and reviews the funding charts, then they will be able to write the next chapter of the plan that explains which of these needs can be funded from year to year. And it may be that none of them can be, those still go in the plan in the ones, you know, the needs plan. It's different from the cost feasible plan. So the consultant is working on that. That's transportation planning language. The some of the items that are on this map that are new transit services are proposed. Some of these came from previous plans, either the previous transit development plans or the long range transportation plan for the county. Other things came from other studies like the Lakeland intermodal study. Some of these new things are actually new this year based on elected official comments, stakeholder comments, group discussion comments, LCB member comments, public surveys, employer interviews, employee surveys, all of those ways of getting public comment rolled into this plan. So there's some new services that are suggested, areas where it is suggested that you would do mobility on demand, and you can look at this map later when you want to. And then some infrastructure and technology and policy needs. And again, this is being this was reviewed by public at surveys and at the public hearings in May, and it will be tied to the financial data that we've got, and then the consultant will analyze what can be done with the funding that is anticipated over the next 10 years. So that's what we're working on now, and over the next 12 weeks, TPO will make a presentation at the August TPO meeting that explains this slowly and slide by slide. And in September, we will bring the draft plan here for you all to review and comment on and open the public hearing, the public comment period. And then to your October meeting, we will bring it back for your final approval. And it is due to FDOT by the end of October. We are aiming for October 28th. So that's where we're at. We're all rocking and rolling on this. Do y'all have any questions?
Commissioner Lindsay?
I'll save them for the TPM.
Okay, yeah, we'll save them for TPO.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And the TPO presentation, Barack wants me to make about a 20-minute presentation. So there will be time to hear about this.
That's great. Glad you're back. Thank you.
Yes, and I have pictures of transit services in Ketchikan, Alaska.
So thank you. Okay.
We could do the squeeze update if you'd like.
I
With
think the
Carl.
mayor would want to hear
Want to hear that?
Is there anything under your report?
Sure. Absolutely.
Maybe do agency updates?
Yes, I can do agency updates. It is with a heavy heart that I announced that Jocelyn Matthews, a former team member of ours in the call center who has been on life support for some time, we were notified has passed away. She was a beloved Citrus Connection employee by all of us. And so James is coordinating to have a memorial stone ground to be put out at our fountain, and we'll have a memorial service. We'll let the board know and the public know as well. And Tyrus Richardson, our TWU 525 section chair, although this was not a union position, he's an ordained minister, so he'll be leading a small service for those who choose to participate. But we send our condolences to Jocelyn Matthews. Continuing in that vein, I'm sure everyone read in the newspaper that transit advocate Doc Dockery also passed away. Again, just for the general public, I know that most people know Doc and Doc's work on high-speed rail. I firmly believe that we would not have high-speed rail coming to Central Florida, even though it's a private entity, if it were not for the groundwork that Doc laid. What most people I don't think know is that when the district started out 41 years ago, we were spending 100% of our budget on operating for many, many years. And so that did not leave money for capital. And Doc and Paula really recognized that transit shelters were something that was needed, but that the district was not spending money on. So Doc worked with John DeRee and with Ben Darby at the time, and they developed a community transit shelter program where Doc actually wrote checks himself, but also went out to the business community and got the business community to build shelters. So if it were not for Doc and Paula's efforts, we would have dozens and dozens of less shelters. But their legacy continues to live on in the fact that even though we have grant funding for shelters, and they're extremely expensive because it's Florida, whether you build a bus shelter or a Burger King, it has to be built to the same standards. Mm-hmm. Still to this day, Rotary, Kiwanis, the League of Women Voters, and others from time to time raise funds for transit shelters because they know that Doc and Paula really set that. So we are with them and their family.
Commissioner Lindsay.
Yes, healthcare. I just wanted to give the board an update. This is not an approval item, but is part of the budget as we'll be discussing. I gave you an update on going out to bid for our healthcare, and we were able to rattle the saber with Cigna, our current carrier. And we were looking at a 27% increase to be able to keep our plan, which is obviously not budgetarily allowable. However, we were able to negotiate with them for a 12.3% increase, which you will see is part of the budget. It is not something that we had wanted to have happened, but it's the best that we were able to negotiate. And so we'll be communicating what that new plan looks like to the employees through CCTV, but it's also part of the budget process. Mm-hmm. Just the highlights for the board, because I believe in transparency. The amount of money that we'll be spending per employee will be increasing from $779.22 to $875.14. That's what the district pays because healthcare is free for our employees. Mm-hmm. And that is for a lesser plan. But to be able to do that. So deductibles will be going up from $1,500 to $2,500. Co-insurance will be going up from 10% to 30%. Tier 1 drugs will be staying at $15. Tier 2 drugs will be increasing by $10. Tier 3 drugs will be increasing by $20. I'd like to thank Steve and Kelly Bennington from Finance and Steve from Human Resources for working diligently to make sure that labs are still free for employees. 70% of healthcare decisions in the United States are made with blood labs. So we felt that that was very important to keep labs for free. X-ray and diagnostics will be going from $0 to a flat fee of $50. Advanced imaging will be staying at a flat fee of $250. Preventative care for 100% of our employees will continue to be offered at $0. Primary care physician will increase from $30 to $50. Specialists will be increasing from $60 to $100. Those are the major changes. We'll be rolling that out to all of the employees at CCTV. 90% of what we are seeing in our healthcare increases, and I believe BKS, when they say this, they say 100%, I believe 90%, is being driven by claims. We had an absolutely catastrophic claims year. And we just got hit very, very hard. And we have not had that in the 10 years that I've been here. Last year, as you'll see in the budget presentation, we had I believe between a 3 and 5% decrease, and we've seen a 3 to 5% increase or decrease, but claims came through this year. The good news is that we didn't dodge the bullet, but we got grazed. So we believe in being transparent with our employees. We're going to communicate this to them very clearly. The good news is that Cigna is offering us a series of enrollment programs, of wellness programs for our employees that go well beyond smoking cessation, things like diabetes management, blood pressure management, and things like that. If we collectively as a team take a certain number of these courses, we are guaranteed between a 3 and 5% reduction on our renewal rate. So I want to be very transparent with the employees. This is the healthcare that we were looking at before negotiation. This is the best deal that we were able to negotiate. Given experience. However, Mr. Mayor, if we are all truly in this together and we make these changes and we start to do things like having preventative care, enroll in these classes, and show Cigna that we're taking it seriously, we may be able to get back to the plan that we want. And if we can't get back to the plan that we want, we can at least stay on the plan that we're on. So I just wanted to be very transparent with everyone. This is obviously this is probably the biggest healthcare change we've had in the district in the time that I've been here. I'm happy that we're staying with the same carrier. 98% of our claims activity is in network. So we know it works with Lakeland Regional. We know it works with Watson Clinic. We know it works with Heart of Florida on the east side of the county. So we've got a very good plan. It's still a very rich plan. It's still free for the employees. 70% of the dependent care coverage is still being covered by the district. The employees will see their share of the 30%. So it's a very, very, very rich plan. It's just, this is what happens when you have claim years. And Commissioner Lindsay, I certainly appreciate you sharing that was happening at the county, because I feel like we're not in the same boat.
My experience on preventative care and health consciousness is adopted by those who are already healthy and health conscious, and the ones that need it the most are the ones who don't participate. So there needs to be something that elevates participation, for those who are most in need, I'd say.
Yes. So stay tuned for that. And then I want to thank Chair McCarley. I know she may talk about it later, and we're taking things a bit out of order, but she met with, or she is on the board of the new park, Bonnet Springs Park, and talked to them about an enhanced squeeze type service that would be able to operate on the roadways there, because we know the golf carts would not be able to service that. And she's asked specifically that we garner some other information, budget, how much the vehicles are, et cetera. So we'll be gathering that information. And we'll be sending a small contingent before the next board meeting to St. Augustine to meet with St. Augustine officials about the big red trams that they run. St. Augustine currently runs 3 different types of vehicles. They run a small electric vehicle, which we're not interested in. They run traditional golf carts, which we're already doing. And then they have the big red tram that is actually run by Merlin Entertainment, who owns Ripley's, believe it or not. And we all know Merlin Entertainment is owned by Legoland. So We're going to go out with the goal of meeting with the FDOT district folks there to find out how they got permission to do that. Meet with the Chamber of Commerce to find out how it's funded and how the business community is supporting that. And then meet with the city officials to find out what's working, what's not, so that when we come back and present to the board of directors, we have a solid picture of how this is working in a different community. And that is the end of my executive director report, other than the fact that Politics on the Park last night was run extremely well by the chamber, and the Randy Roberts Foundation did a great job with the straw poll. It was very well attended.
Okay, we'll circle back to number 1, the approval of the minutes. Oh, do you have one more thing?
I do. I'm sorry. Sorry, I flinched. Yes. And I'd also like to thank Erin Killebrew Kinlaw for penning the last of the fair share deals for the year. She was able
to start over next year.
You asked for a 2-year cycle, sir. You asked for a 2-year cycle. So we do have the one community that's on the 1-year cycle, which is Dundee, which was part of the negotiation process. And so Erin was able to secure a $20,000 increase towards the fair share contribution for Haines City, which is no small feat considering the season of change that they have had and are going through in Haines City. So congratulations on threading the needle on
And
that.
our fuel cost for Aaron's driving will go down. All around the county.
Yeah. So that will now complete the 2-year cycles of the fair share agreements, with the exception of Dundee, which again was a negotiation process, but they have the ability to auto renew.
I always have to ask.
Mulberry, yes.
I've only got 819 days left.
Yes, sir.
Mulberry.
Yes, sir. I called Marcia Fox again. I've called Marcia Fox again earlier this week and asked where we are with the number. So I will follow up with her again this week. We're getting the total taxable value as it currently stands so that we're able to go in. Commissioner Neil Devine, might be Ned Devine, Commissioner Devine and I are on a constant communication basis. So this will be an agenda item and working with him for a presentation to the commission.
Well, they have a large, what's the word I'm looking for? CRA.
Yes, sir.
Would that be affected there? So we need to take that into consideration.
That's been in discussion with commissioners as well. That is the end of my report.
Are you sure?
Did I forget anything, anyone?
Look around.
Oh, that's a different agenda.
Yeah, we'll come back to that one. That's gonna take.
That's 7A.
Okay, so let's go back to the approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
A motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll go back to Ms. Bennington for contract modification on 3E.
This is for Transitions Commute Solutions. As you know, starting October 1st, they are going to help us run 3 of the routes. So we are asking to increase the budget for, or their contract. The not to exceed amount should increase from 1.75 to 2.5 so that we can meet the needs of the county. The service hourly rate is $72.88 that we've agreed on for the new routes. LAMTD's service cost per revenue hour is $130 an hour.
Do you have a motion
So move.
and a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
Can I add something?
Sure.
I'd like to mention that Lisa Harris in procurement has been instrumental in this and helped get it through and worked closely with transitions. And although she is great in procurement, I'm excited to announce that she has taken the grants manager position. Rodney Wetzel is retiring this week, and Lisa has over 15 years of transit experience, starting with HART. And when she started with us, she was in procurement and grants. So now she is going back into grants and has been training.
Thank you. Great. Thanks, Holly.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. What we've all been waiting for, budget presentation, 2023.
They're gonna let me use
Chair, board members, Mr. Mayor, thank you for allowing Kelly and myself to give you the 2022-2023 death by PowerPoint LAMTD budget presentation. Marcia, I'm sorry, we'll only be mentioning the county a few times, as this is the Lakeland Urbanized Area or Citrus Connection budget. But we will be talking about the county and transportation disadvantage. I'd like to thank Commissioner Lindsay, Commissioner Santiago, Marcia, for another seamless year in contracting with the county. We certainly appreciate that, and this will be mentioned in that budget presentation. And as you know, the transportation disadvantage works on the state fiscal year, but we'll touch on that as well, as we are one large organization with 3 different funding pots. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention and thank David for this format. Again, this is the one time a year we kill you with PowerPoint slides. This is the format that Mr. Prasad and I have presented for 7 years. And after talking with Kelly, we felt that her coming in the middle of the fiscal year, that this was the best way to present the budget. But again, we serve at your leisure. So if you have feedback on anything, we are welcome to it during the presentation, after the presentation, at the budget, at the annual retreat or anything like that. So without further ado, we will present the budget. James, next slide. The overall budget presentation, the agency is totally budgeting approximately $13 million or an 8.6% increase over the fiscal year 21-22 budget. There are two new approved permanent programs. The first is the Squeeze, which you will be getting an update from Carly Flagler, who moved from intern and is now a full-time employee on the Squeeze. The Squeeze will have the 50 farmers markets, the Tasty Tuesdays, as well as 17 special events, which will be determined with the Lakeland Downtown Development Authority. And thanks to the chair and the mayor and their commitment to interns, you also funded the intern program. There was a discussion with Commissioner Lindsay about having that be outsourced through a temp agency, but ultimately it was decided that these were going to be Citrus Connection employees. And so even though they're temporary, we wanted to have them be part-time. We are also creating a new operations support department to support planning. We are converting one full-time project manager position, which we are closing out to help fund the full-time operations support and planning division. And as you know, we set aside the $0.68 million for the replacement of buses and capital. And the largest part of our budget presentation this year is the driver salary increases, which is reducing the total headcount of full-time employees by LAMTD and the county, 2 budgets, 1 solution for the agency through that. Kelly?
As you can see, the salary wages for admin, we have budgeted 2.25% increase, which we've historically done. The salaries for drivers are the step increases, which we've previously discussed. FRS has increased from 10.82 to 11.91. Health insurance unfortunately went from a negative 4.7% to 12%. The fuel projection, the price per gallon was $2.87 last year and has now gone up to $3.80. Other operating expenses are based on a trend or usage. The inflation rate last year was 2%. This year it's unpredictable based on the state of the economy. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. On the fuel projection, so that's what we're paying right now, or that's what we're projecting we'll pay throughout the year
That's
when it
what
fluctuates?
It's been fluctuating, but that's what we're projecting.
Okay.
What are we paying now?
I would have to look at it. It's around that rate.
It's dropped us in the past a month and a half for about $3 for the.
Okay.
But that's only on unleaded, right? The diesel is still, yes. Sorry, and then the capital budget funding and debt service remains the same at $680,000.
Fiscal challenges for those that have been on, it's the 3 of you, I'm sorry. Got about 6 minutes in here for Commissioner Santiago, which I can cut out. She's our newest member. For all of you, you'll notice that effectively 7 of these have stayed the same for the last 5 or 6 years. Fiscal challenges for the district largely have not changed over time, but they have gotten slightly better. We do not have a diverse revenue source. As you know, we are highly reliant on 3 particular funding sources, the ad valorem taxes, the Federal Transit Administration, and the FDOT, and then fare box revenues as well. The transit asset management's coming down The pipeline, as you know, we have the bus lease financing, which has allowed us to spend that 0.68 million in a smart way. 0.68 million sounds like a lot of money when you're talking about vehicles, but when you realize a bus costs approximately $500,000, and then the bells and whistles, the lease financing is the way to go. Our reliance on ad valorem taxes, which, knock on wood, has been our saving grace for the last few years, but we always need to watch that because we remember the 2006, 2008 time frame, and then driver turnover and stabilizing of the wages. Kelly?
Last year, the estimated revenues were 11.6 million, proposed expenses were almost 12 million, and we had an operating deficit of 390,000, which we covered with the ARPA grant. This year, the revenues equal the expenses of almost 13 million.
Looking at balancing the proposed budget, obviously our major concern in looking at this was the potential recession that was ahead. We have seen fares decline due to COVID and the inability to have drivers out on the road. I'm happy to announce, and I'll give you the specific numbers today, that we are seeing a significant increase in our ability to hire drivers. And you'll see from the number of riders that we are starting to see an increase in our ridership, and that should continue. That trend should continue as we're able to get more drivers on the road. And then obviously the increase in the ad valorem taxes across the county, which has been a 13% increase. Next slide, please. The COVID pandemic has somewhat subsided, but looking at the volatility that is possibly ahead, we'll talk a little bit about the CARES funding, which is $1.9 million and helps us be able to purchase buses. That's given us greater flexibility with the 0.68 million we have. And as Mr. Prasad had pointed out last month, we have an additional $1.5 million sitting in the state pool that we have not spent. And then the American Recovery Act at $3.3 million, which will provide us stability as well. And we talked a little bit about the driver shortage. Next slide, please, James. Specifically looking at the ARPA funds, it was $350 billion, and public transit was one of the largest winners. We received two allocations from ARPA. The first was for Lakeland, the Lakeland urbanized area, which we gave budget presentations on throughout the year, $3.3 million. That's being used to purchase buses, but it's also being used to pave lots, fix concrete, fix driveways, make improvements, fix up the terminal minimally while we're waiting on the intermodal facility. So there's a variety of uses. Touching a little bit on the county, because Marcia's here, and again, we're one agency. Winter Haven received a very healthy allocation as well of $2.4 million. That is going towards buses because Commissioner Lindsay, as you know, we have a contract with the county for, it's a fee-for-service contract. That fee-for-service contract does not have a capital replacement program. And so this allows us to purchase those buses for the county. So effectively, this allocation is the county's capital replacement program. That's not to say that we still don't take advantage of federal and state grants when they're available. We do, but this is a large saving grace for the county to be able to purchase those large, expensive fixed route vehicles. Next slide. How those funds can be used. They can't be used to fund any pension deficits. They can't be used for a variety of reasons. They can't be used, but they can be used. They must be allocated they must be obligated by December of 2024, and they must be fully spent by December of 2026. Rodney's not here today. As it was mentioned, he's retiring, but we've been having regular grants meetings every few months to make sure that we're spending these dollars as aggressively as possible. Todd's been working on the procurement side. We now have Lisa. So we've got a team that is hitting the ground running, and we're going to make sure that those funds are spent and allocated. The major challenge with this, obviously, is expended versus deliverable. As Jay's talked about, we can order a bus today, but the lead time is a year and a half. So it's some time. So Kelly's going to talk specifically about how we budgeted the LAMTD funds.
So we allocated these costs over 3 years for these funds, Last year we had 1 million. This year it's 1.1 million. Last year we had 400,000 in operating. This year it's 450,000, and then capital remained the same at 662,000. And as Thomas mentioned several times, none of these funds are used for any ongoing expenses.
Chair, Commissioners, when we say operating, we have put this aside as a rainy day fund. This is for budget shortfalls, fuel, insurance, things that we see that may not be coming. This is not what some of our partners are doing to our east and our west, where they're using these funds to put out services that 2 to 3 years from now, they're going to have to dial back. Just wanted to be very clear.
Good.
That was the direction from Commissioner Lindsay and Chair McCarley, that we make sure that we not spend limited funds on providing service.
These are two pie charts. There's not a lot of variation from last year to this year. Ad valorem taxes increased from 47% to 49%. Passenger fares decreased from 5% to 3%. Federal grants increased from 24% to 28%, and the state grants decreased from 13% to 11%.
So looking specifically at the revenues, we have a total estimated revenues of approximately $13 million, or an 8.61%. Fares are projected at $340,000. Property tax revenues are our saving grace, up 13%. We did receive a large federal grant increase of 22.7%. You'll also notice, though, the DOT grants decreased 6.86%, and other revenues and advertising are up. So why are our federal grants up, but our state grants are down? As you know, we did not have at that time, nor do we have a joint participation agreement currently for the Peach Line. I'm happy to report, and I will be reporting, that we have a verbal commitment from FDOT for the continuation of funding the Peach Line for the perpetuity of the road diet, depending on what the commission picks. However, to be fiscally appropriate, it was not appropriate to include that in the budget, which is why you're seeing those state revenues decline. Kelly?
Again, not a lot of variation on the expenses on the pie charts from last year to this year. Salaries and fringes increased 1%, 65% to 66%. Materials and supplies, which includes your fuel, 12% to 13%. Everything else is similar.
Again, as Kelly has talked about, approximately 65 to 66% of our total budget is spent on salaries, fringes, materials, and supplies. And I know that you all have talked about this in the years that you have been on the board, but we are heavily a service organization. So a large chunk of our budget is automatically programmed every year. That doesn't make it easy, but it's automatically programmed to making sure that we have drivers in the seats and that we're meeting the needs of the community. I would like to thank the city commission, the mayor, the county, everyone in this room for their leadership and partnership in working with the Lakeland CRA. The largest variance that you'll see here is that we are no longer paying into the CRA. We did receive that permanent exemption from the city of Lakeland. Before we move on, we can move on to the next slide, but I would also like to note here for the general public that's watching, also for the city commission, I would like to note that since we received the CRA exemption, the route changes that are taking effect on October 1st heavily favor the CRA area and downtown Lakeland, and the east and west side community circulators that have 45-minute frequency primarily are in those CRA areas. Also, your increased investment in the squeeze is almost predominantly all within the CRA area, and your commitment to making the squeeze fare free also benefits the CRA area. So we have received that exemption from the CRA, but I'd just like to publicly state that this board has made a significant investment in making sure that that part of Lakeland receives quality services and urbanizing services, which was the intent of our agreement all along. Again, total expenses increasing by 8.6%, the largest percentage of that being the driver pay of 8.9% increase. Fringe benefits up 12.5% due to the increase in the FRS contributions. That employer rate is an employee rate is set by the state, and because they're making more money, the increased contributions are there as well. We're having 123.5 positions. Fuel, materials, and supplies has seen a significant increase due to inflation of 20.8%. This is cutting J both ways. Not only are materials and supplies getting more expensive, but when we can get the chips and things, it's a lot more. It takes a lot more time to be able to get them. So not only are we paying more for materials and supplies, but we're having to wait longer to get them. And then casualty and liability increasing 15% due to inflation as well. The next slide. And when I rehearsed this yesterday, the chair asked that I make a significant pause here to talk about our budget composition. So obviously, again, Looking at the Lakeland side of the equation, ad valorem taxes make up the largest of our budget. This really allows us to be able to draw on those FDOT and FTA grants and fund the agency while we're billing those grants. We have to provide the service in order to be able to bill. So this is the cash flow that keeps us afloat. Thanks to the county and Marcia Andreessen's leadership at the county paying us up front on the county side would be this example that allows us to float while we bill the federal and state grants for the county. Passenger fares, contract revenue, federal and state grants as well. Next slide, Kelly.
This reiterates what Tom just said about the revenues. Our ad valorem taxes have increased 13%. Our passenger fares decreased 42%. The contract revenues are down 3.5%. Federal grants have increased 22%, while state grants have decreased 6.86%. Other revenues are up 12.34% for an overall 8.61% increase. On the expense side, salaries and wages have increased 8.9%. Fringe benefits are up 12.5%. Services are up 18.2%. The materials and supplies, including your fuel, are up 20.8%. The casualty and liability insurance is up 15%, and the overall increase is 8.6%.
Looking at revenues as a percent of the total budget as well. Again, federal grants significantly going up and our state grants fluctuating down, but we expect the state grants will have a positive impact once we receive the joint participation agreement from the FDOT.
That's my question. So it'll go into the positive once we have that agreement in place.
Depending on the level of funding, yes.
Okay.
I would like to thank Paul Sims. He attended the FDOT road diet meeting in his new official capacity, and he explained to the Florida Department of Transportation that the Peach Line works better when it has two buses on it rather than one. One bus services the community of the Peach Line very well. Two buses serves that even better, but also provides much better connectivity to get out of the Dixieland area. Paul explained it so well that FDOT asked us to transmit that budget to them. So Kelly Bennington has already transmitted that budget to FDOT. Unlike any other project, Chair, that we have done with FDOT, this particular road diet project seems to be the answer is yes, we will fund it right out of the gate instead of we'll get back to you.
Everyone knock on wood.
I wish we had more than it, but that's what we have at this point. And there's no reason with our relationship that we've had with the staff, including Paul Simmons, who used to work at the county with Marcia. There's no indication that they would not make good on that promise. But again, a promise shouldn't be included in a budget. Again, looking at salaries, wages, fringe benefits, and services, it totals almost 79% of our total budget. So again, we are heavily a service organization. That again, we don't have a lot of wiggle room to play with our budget.
As you can see, in 2018, our ad valorem taxes were almost 4 million. They've slowly increased to 6.4 million. This year's budget increase is 8.6%, similar to last year's 8.4%. But as you can see over the past years, there's been a variance.
So next, we're going to talk about capital expenses budget and specifically the debt service payments and the bus lease financing that Mr. Prasad introduced to the district that really allowed us to be able to do two things. Leverage Mr. Cheney's relationship with Lynx and rehab the buses, the last of which just came off the line, as we'll now be rehabbing our own buses, but to enter into the lease financing to get us through those challenging years, to get us to the point now where our fleet is much more modernized. Next slide, James. So many governments obviously use the capital lease financing to take effect of the low interest payments, and we're going to see that next. So we are currently lease financing for new buses approved by the board in 2019. We have 4 fixed route buses at $200,000 a piece, or a total of $800,000. And the total debt service payment on that is a little over $170,000 at a interest rate of 5 years of 2.54%. So thank you, Mr. Prasad, for locking that in. And that rate is absolutely fantastic. And our debt service payments, as you can see, were 132 and 170 collectively. Looking at how we've spent those funds in the last few years, we've been able to lease new vehicles with the debt service, purchase administrative and shop vehicles, fund the small deficit from this year, lease services on other vehicles. We're going to be redoing flooring, and there's IT equipment in here as well. Thank you. Other expenses that we have done in the past, which may even be older than this board, we purchased modular buildings. This building that's here, all of the equipment that's in this building, the modular building that was next door, the demolition of the old fuel island that was here, and then the repairs to the Lynx buses. Again, in the future, this will be rehab of Citrus Connection buses. And this is a breakdown of the debt service payments and the capital reserve. In addition to this, what you see here on the slide, as Mr. Prasad pointed out, we have an additional $1.5 million sitting in the state pool.
Over the past 16 years, we've had an operating deficit. In 7 of those years, our net financial position is now in positive 106,000 as of the year end 2021.
That's awesome.
So looking at this slide over time, the change in the net financial position, I really believe truly that this tells the history, the recent history of the district. So you can see here with the prior administration, a significant challenge in the fact that the Citrus Connection did not have a capital replacement program, and so it became extremely expensive to maintain the buses. And effectively, the Citrus Connection was putting out way too much service for what was able to do. They made a slight adjustment. Commissioner McCarley had asked me, why did we see another dip that was here? You may have read in the newspapers, and Mayor, I confirmed this with Mayor Fields last night at Politics on the Park. This is when the Florida Department of Transportation came in and effectively declared the Citrus Connection unsafe and was about to shut the Citrus Connection down. At that time, depending on who you believe in the lawsuit, there were Detroit diesel mechanics that were hired, that were brought here full time, that were effectively Citrus Connection employees because the maintenance department wasn't sure how to be able to maintain those vehicles. So the Citrus Connection was paying for Detroit diesel mechanics to live here and try to maintain those vehicles. And then largely under this current administration and this leadership, we were able to right the ship. Why did we see this decline here? That's as we were booking the FRS pension liability as the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District benefited from the merger in so much as that Jim Freeman and the current County Commission Board required that we join the Florida retirement system, which benefited the 100 employees of the district as we had no retirement, and then protected the 88 pensions of the employees, 87 of which came to ultimately work for the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District. So folks like Rodney Wenzel, who's retiring this week, Ruby Kimball, who spent a career in the county and is finishing up here, will be able to finish out their pensions.
That was just really quick, the mayor asked. That was 2010 into 2011, that major drop.
Correct.
Okay.
Looking at fare box recovery ratio, this again tells the story of the district, not to harp too much on history, but statistical fare box recovery ratio for a urbanized fixed route system, the national average is 20%. We talked a lot about that. This is the time when the Citrus Connection had not merged with the county. And so our fare box recovery ratio reflected a small urban transportation system. We were actually beating the national average of 20%. So our fares were very competitive. We were charging about what we should have been charging at the time. So why do we have these fluctuations? Well, this was when we merged with Polk County Transit Services. And the decrease in fare box recovery ratio to an outsider may be shocking. And there's obviously no excuse for that, but there is an explanation for that. And that explanation is that the county was the yin to our yang. And so we were a urbanized system that was heavy and fixed route, and all we provided was paratransit services for our fixed route. When we took over for the county, we took over largely rural routes that had 3, 4, or 5 people on the bus at any one time. That's expected when you're running a bus from Fort Meade to Frostproof. And so the fare box recovery ratio reflects a county the size of Delaware, where the largest city inside of it is approximately 130, 150,000 people, and the rest is largely rural. I know it doesn't feel like that for anyone in the room with all the rooftops that we've had. But again, you see a stabilization here. COVID-19 hits, and we see a significant decline in ridership, and now we're starting to shovel ourselves out of that. Looking at the revenue hours, sorry.
No,
Revenue hours, again, I believe it's not a story, it's a trend. The same trend that we have here. We just have the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District providing services. As you all know, it didn't get much press, but before we could merge with the county, we had to put our own house in order and have the 0.68 million come out. And so we reduced our total number of revenue hours, and then we merged with the county, and we've seen largely a stabilization. Part of this is thanks to Erin Killebrew-Kinlaw and the work that she's done on the east side of the county. Now that we have share agreements, are we going down First Street instead of Third Street? Yes. Are we going from 6 runs of the bus to 5 runs of the bus? Yes. But largely we've seen revenue hour stability because they now have skin in the game with the fair share agreements. The decrease, obviously, being that with the driver shortage and COVID-19, we haven't been able to put that up. But again, for the public, our issue right now with putting out maximum service on the street is not COVID-19, it's the driver shortage, which I'll report on shortly. Cost per revenue hour, again, I believe that these slides all push the same narrative, the same historical truth, and that the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District's cost per revenue hour reflected an agency of approximately 100 individuals, and then we merged with the county and largely saw stabilization. Our partners to our east and our west's cost per revenue hours are right around $100 to $110 an hour. So we're right competitive with where our partners are. And then obviously this last year, we saw an increase in our cost per revenue hour and that we weren't able to put out as much service on the street, but our administrative costs stayed the same. So even with inflation, we predict or would hope to see that our cost per revenue hour starts to decline as we put more service on the street and become fully staffed. Looking at total ridership, again, right sizing the agency, COVID-19 hits, and now we're starting to see our dip outside of COVID-19. Riders are starting to come back, and I'm very excited about what James and Carly and the planning department did and what our new routes will do for the district as well. Fare box recovery ratio, telling the same story. We'll be extremely fiscally conservative as we see our ridership continue to recover after fare box recovery ratio. And looking at the fiscal year proposed budget here for our total ridership, again, Lakeland Area Mass Transit District, right sizing the organization. And now we're seeing our ridership numbers start to come back up out of COVID-19. We don't show the spaghetti monster very often, but we do show it once a year. This is what the new system for the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District will look like. It's just good to be able to see it as part of the budget process. I promise I'm almost done, and then Kelly will take us home the rest of the way. Looking at our total fuel costs, again, this continues to be our Achilles heel, but thanks to the work that Todd and Lisa have done, we purchase on the fuel consortium, which I talk about, I think, every board meeting. When Commissioner Lindsay started on the board, our average vehicle length was 40 feet. I'm happy to say today our average vehicle length is between 27 and 30 feet. The other thing that that's allowed us to do is diversify our fuel in that we are now running unleaded vehicles and we're running diesel vehicles. As Todd had pointed out, and the media is only half reporting, fuel prices are coming down for unleaded. For diesel, they're remaining critically high. And so that continues to be a challenge, but we're doing the most that we can with our fuel, putting out the smallest vehicles that we can. The question is, obviously, can we do more? And the answer to that question, as we told the chair yesterday, is absolutely we can. When that East Polk County maintenance facility is built, we'll be able to house the vehicles there, maintain them, decrease our deadhead, decrease our fuel costs as well. So in summary, and then I'll hand it over. Oh, I got 2 more. The Lakeland Area Mass Transit District budget is increasing 8.6%, transportation disadvantaged increasing 7.8%, and Polk County Transit Services including increasing 11.5%. Marcia, why is the county increasing a little bit more than the city, I'm sorry, the LAMTD area or the transportation disadvantaged? As just for the record, and then we transmitted this to the county. When we took over from the county, we received 3 years of unused federal funding that the county had not used. And that those 3 years of federal funding have now run out. And so this is an actual cash outlay. I'm happy to say, though, that the county only had to increase its total financial contribution. I believe it was 3.6% this year, or $160,000. But that I wanted to just describe for Todd, if he's watching, or anyone else, there was a discrepancy between the increase in the county and the LAMTD. But thanks to Mr. Prasad, thanks to Ms. Bennington, and especially thanks to our auditors, we can assure you that the dollars spent in the district are staying in the district, the dollars that are spent in the county are being spent in the county, and that the dollars spent on transportation disadvantaged are being spent in transportation disadvantaged. I promise this is my last slide. So in summary, the Citrus Connection is constricting this year from a position perspective so that we're able to adequately pay for the drivers. On the east side of the county, that is going to be contracting with Transitions Commute Solutions, who can do it at a lower cost per revenue hour while providing a good level of service. Again, Mr. Dunn is going to work for Transitions Community Solutions, but he will not be touching any of these contracts. So we are going from 192 employees to 182, from 8.5 part-time to 20. That seems like a large jump, but again, that includes the interns who are here for a very brief amount of time. And the Transportation Disadvantage Program is staying the same at 16.
We transmitted the DR 420 directly after our last board meeting, after it was approved, and we received certification that it's been submitted. The next steps are the first public hearing will be held on September 7th at 5:01 p.m. at Lakeland City Hall. The second public hearing will be held September 21st at 5:01 p.m. at Lakeland City Hall also. And then our new fiscal year will start on October 1st.
Right, Commissioner Lindsay has a list. Mayor
I want to go back to the $1.5 million that's in the pool. Is that, and that's for additional purchases of buses? I want to understand that a little bit. And is it reflected on our balance sheet?
Approximately 4 to 5 years, when we went through the 18% service reduction, that translated into $680,000 a year. That money was restricted, which means before the lease financing for the buses, if we didn't spend anything, it was restricted, invested in the state pool. So bottom line, that's the accumulation since we started to now. So that money is unused, but based on the direction of the board and for financial reporting, is considered restricted for capital purposes.
But it's restricted asset.
These restricted assets are discretionary to the board.
Got it.
Commissioner Lindsay.
A couple of rambling comments that may generate some conversation. First, commend the staff for the last
Absolutely.
decade and forward. We're dancing on the edge of a financial razor blade. I mean, there's no cushion anywhere, and the slightest bump in COVID or gas or whatever, insurance, can be a
Property
maybe.
values.
That's the next one. Don't count on 13% next year. So that's not going to happen.
No, sir.
I want to give a shout out. Mr. Prasad was the one that facilitated the lease program, but that idea was brought forward by Commissioner Jim Molest and prompted the conversation that said, yes, this is viable, and staff took it from there. You made the comment that the grants are tied to service, so the more service, the greater opportunity. So is there an opportunity with driver shortage, diesel fuel prices going up, to rely more heavily on the Peach Line type vehicles, which don't require CDL drivers, which are gas driven? Now, I don't think it's a bad thing that from time to time a few people have to stand. But typically, I would think the capacity is probably close to what is a maximum drive for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. So is that makes sense in the capital spending program going forward? It may allow us to restore some routes we've had to cut back because we didn't have drivers. But if you don't need CDL drivers, then that may give us some more flexibility. It's just food for thought.
Including Bonnet Springs Park.
Yes. How do you treat all agencies are limited to budgeting 95% of projected revenues? So where does the 5% go? Is it a carryover as additional revenues or set aside? How do you, or you wind up spending it on, you go over the budget. So how is that 5% accommodated or budgeted?
So
That's as you indicated, it's a directive from state law. We can only budget 95% of the total ad valorem. And if you look at the monthly financial statement that's presented to the board, I think the last one with 101%. So which means that we are in fact receiving the 95% plus. That 5% is not in the budget. So if it comes in the budget, it rolls into your retained earnings that year end because we are in an enterprise fund, not a governmental fund.
Well, that was my point. That's rollover additional revenue for the next fiscal year.
Correct. But it's unallocated. It stays in retained earnings.
Nice.
That's it. Does the CDL beach type bus make sense?
Yes. Yes.
For all the reasons.
So what I
To restore route, non-CDL drivers, less fuel, etc.
So we talked about it before the board meeting. I would like to have this be a board action item for us to be able to report back to you. I would just like to meet with Mr. Sims and Mr. Shively and just talk through and give you a detailed answer. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And I believe the board deserves that. However, given our situation in hiring drivers, I would not like to wait a month. So Ben, pursuant to Florida public records law, I'll email you each individually, since this would not be something we would vote on, and answer that question for you before the next board.
Awesome. It's a great opportunity
Agree.
to continue to be nimble.
Yes.
So I got
Commissioner, that's good. Well, just kudos to the staff and the leadership. You are, as Commissioner Lindsay said, dancing on a razor blade. And you guys work so diligently. And probably for the public, what they might not understand is you have to have that cushion so you can provide service because the grants are retroactive. So you have to do the work in order to get the grant, which seems counterintuitive from a budgetary standpoint. But it's just the way this works. So that's really important to note and continue to note that you have that ad valorem cushion-ish so that you can provide this service, but it's a chicken or an egg game.
Yes, Chair McCarley, and that's an excellent point. And I know you reminded us yesterday to discuss, and I apologize, I just forgot that the $400,000 that is set aside every year is a rainy day fund or a contingency fund, if you will. The Lakeland Area Mass Transit District, we discussed, we would see two major areas where that may need to be needed on an annual basis. Obviously hurricanes, and you know this at the county and at the city level, that you provide that service. FEMA gives you that guarantee of reimbursement. But I believe that the county just received its final check for the 4 hurricanes that hit last fiscal year. So that would allow us to do that, or the Lake Morton fire, or any other additional evacuations where FEMA were to reimburse. Our other large Achilles heel, because of the lack of our diversified revenue sources, is a federal government shutdown. So when we had that federal government shutdown a few years ago, you 3 were on the board. It was a very, very challenging time for the district to not be able to bill our federal grants. And so that does provide us that flexibility to be able to continue to pay our employees.
Thank you. So do I have a motion to accept the budget as proposed?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion further? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent work.
Yes, thank you very much. All right, Mr. Darby, we are moving on to legal.
Yes,
Okay.
Florida statutes require the district to adopt a schedule of regular meetings for the next fiscal year. Resolution 22-16 lists the meetings for next fiscal year. I noticed on page 1, there's a
Excuse me.
same time, same place, second Wednesday, except for July 19 and August 16. Those are a week. Those are the third Wednesday based on the discussion that we had yesterday relating to starting school, etc. So I did notice though there's a typo on the first page of the resolution. It ended up for 8 o'clock on January the 11th. That's just a typo. I'll correct that. So it's at 8:30 second Wednesday, except for July and August, third Wednesday.
Have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 22-17 relates to the addition of property. We received the owner's letter yesterday about 10:30, and it's property on North State Road 33 owned by Gourmet Foods Lakeland International. It's 8.42 acres on North State Road 33 as required by the city of Lakeland as a part of the development.
Do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Yes, sir, Commissioner Lindsay.
There was a time that I know you got it late, as you said, but there was a time that we were getting maps that showed where these annexations occurred to give us some sense of.
Contact.
Yes, I
Can we
sent a copy.
restore that in
Yes,
the
sir.
future?
We can, yeah,
Yes.
here's what I sent. This is just the property appraisers, the
That's
description of the
better than what we
location.
have.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Lindsay, I'll make sure that we have the
Yeah.
formal
Typically
process
do.
that we had for the last year and a half.
Well, what has happened and will happen, Chuck Barmby's staff sends us the map showing more information than that.
Good.
But we got this yesterday at 10:30, and actually Chuck wasn't aware of it until about 4:30. So.
Thank you, Mr. Darby.
Passed.
Well, we already approved it. No, oh, no, we didn't approve it. All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moving on. All right, we have a squeeze update from Ms. Flagler. Come on up.
It's a Prezi.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Chair, Commissioners. Thank you so much for having me today. I promise this won't be another death by PowerPoint. My name is Carly, and I'm part of the Planning Department of Cities Connection. And today we wanted to remind you of the upcoming, or the already passed squeeze expansion into daytime service. So due to the extreme popularity of the squeeze, which is moving between 150 to 200 riders each weekend, we decided to add a Saturday morning service to meet this demand. Another reason for this expansion was to expand access to the Lakeland Downtown Farmers Market for the surrounding communities. So this new expansion was going to run from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and have the same route as the night squeeze. We actually ran this past weekend on this route, and it actually had 44 riders on its first morning alone. While we do recognize that the farmers market is closed during the month of August, we decided to still start running now in order to allow a chance for our drivers, supervisors, and riders to adapt to this new service and have the most enjoyable experience as we move forward. So we really do look forward to seeing how the community utilizes this service and how we can further benefit them in the future. Again, thank you so much for your time. Are there any questions?
So I can park at Florida Southern and get on the squeeze and go to the farmer's market and come back.
Yes, sir.
My son will be sitting next to you.
If you don't stop. Any other questions? Thank you, Carly. Good job.
Thanks, Carly.
So just as a reminder, Carly was a
Yes.
intern to full-time employee hire. We also have Karina here, and Karina is another intern to full-time hire
Great job.
who just accepted a position with us in the Human Resources Department. So
Great.
I want to thank the Board of Directors that we are really getting some quality talent local by having a paid internship program. So thank you very much. It makes our job of recruiting much easier.
Mhm.
Okay, let's go to the road diet discussion that we're all looking forward to.
Yes, so I gave about 90% of that already. So we had a very good meeting with Paul Simmons and Michelle Peranto and her team from the FDOT, and we have a funding commitment orally from FDOT for funding of the road diet in perpetuity. However, the joint participation agreement will not be ready for this board meeting. Their fiscal year starts in June. We should be receiving, they're getting back to us on how quickly they can start that prior to the June timeframe. So we're waiting to hear from them. It will include the 2 buses, or they're considering the 2 buses that Mr. Sims had presented. And we do not have an answer yet on whether or not pre-award authority would be available, but we are looking forward to whether we are getting that answer as well. Currently, we are running the Peach Line with FDOT funding because we're using the FDOT block grant funds, which we are in the position until the end of the fiscal year to be able to use because of the driver shortage. We were told by FDOT that the city commission will be, we were told at that time at that meeting, and Chuck Barnby attended as well, that the city commission is anticipated to take some type of vote action on the future of the road diet at their October board meeting. So we look.
I love that information.
So we're not sure at staff what that decision is, but we look forward to you all making it.
Sure you are.
Will there be a hiatus where we don't get reimbursed if we'll have to provide service for a month or 2 or whatever, if we don't get reimbursed for?
Yes, I would anticipate that between this time and the end of the fiscal year.
Whose year?
Our fiscal year, October, is that they will say you've got block grant funding. That would be my reading the tea leaves. Will we get something sooner from them? I would say they'd probably try to tie it to our fiscal year based on how that meeting went. Again, in discussions with Mr. Barnby and the city staff, if we have a joint participation agreement for the Peach Line, as the city commission's making that decision in October, whatever decision that may be, just a thought that the bus pullout lanes, which I know are not popular with anyone, or the dedicated bus lanes may be a redundant choice if the Peach Line's funded. But again, whatever decision the city commission makes.
I can't imagine those would be their choices.
Yeah. At
So-
least 2 of them would not want that.
That's great.
And then, of course, we bring that joint participation agreement forward to you all for approval. So that's the road diet update. I'd also like to state that we are currently, with this class of drivers, we currently have enough drivers in training that we will be fully staffed in our paratransit TD department once folks come out of training. And as of this morning, we are down to 14 drivers short. So I will be doing a CCTV today with Kelly after the meeting about the annual budget for the drivers, and that will be an internal only facing CCTV, and I will be hitting very detailed the budget areas regarding the driver increases, so that hopefully that gets out to those few employees that are concerned that the October raises are not coming, alleviate their fears, which then gets those drivers that I believe are waiting to truly see that the raises go through to come back. And if we can coax them back earlier because they see a CCTV and the transparency that's there, that's all the better.
Great. Any other questions or comments? And nothing else from your
No, ma'am.
informational summary? All right. Any other business? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.